So recently I've been in a Spider-Man mood, and since I don't own a whole lot of Spider-Man books, I thought I'd instead check and see what was what on the internet. I found a couple of Spider-Man shows on Netflix and watched a few episodes. You'll get a video this Friday to hear me talk about Spider-Man Unlimited, but today I want to talk about Ultimate Spider-Man, which premiered in 2012 on the Disney Channel. I had heard all kinds of awful things about this series, but one of the biggest complaints I heard was that this show was the reason that the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon was canceled. Now, I don't know how true that is, but I only ever saw one episode of Spectacular, so I wasn't going to hold it against Ultimate Spider-Man too much, even if it was true. So even keeping all of the negative things that I had heard about this series in mind, I more or less went in with no expectations. And I have to say, I actually liked the first episode. Sure, there were some things I didn't like. I couldn't watch this without thinking about Drake Bell when I heard Spider-Man talk. Sometimes reasonably high-caliber celebrities can get away with doing voice work, and you would never know that it was them doing the voice. For a great example of this, see Mark Hamill in just about anything that he's done. But in this case, all I could think about was, that's that kid from Drake and Josh. And he's not even a bad actor, really. If I didn't know that he was doing the voice, I would not have picked up on it. But yeah, that was the thing. And some of the writing was not the best. At one point, Spider-Man refers to J. Jonah Jameson as a big ol' cranky pants. It could be that with Spidey being such a smart guy outside of the costume, I was expecting a better quip than that. There were some other times when I thought the dialogue was grown out loud worthy. Not necessarily dialogue related, but you know how in a really lowbrow, slapstick-oriented cartoon, or even in a live-action endeavor, if a bad guy gets hit in the face with a frying pan or something like that, they're still standing for a moment and then they make a somewhat high-pitched moan before they spiral to the ground? Yeah, we get that here, and as you might have guessed, that's not really my thing in the least. I think for the two episodes that I did watch, the big thing that I did not like is this feeling I get that someone high up in an office building somewhere said, we need to make a Spider-Man show and it needs to be really dumb so that kids will laugh at it. That's not entirely fair because there's actually a lot about the first episode and even some in the second episode that I really liked quite a bit. But the stuff like the slapstick humor or the really awful dialogue, I cannot help but think that that was done on purpose in order to try and appeal to the lowest common denominator. And that's just not okay. You look at something like Avatar: The Last Airbender or Batman the Animated Series, those shows appeal to multiple demographics, and they don't require speaking down to the younger crowd. If you create smart stories, you can bring the lowest common denominator up instead of bringing yourself down. And what's really annoying about this is that Paul Dini wrote both of the episodes that I watched. He was like the guy that made Batman the Animated Series so incredible to watch. It's really weird to me that a guy could go from writing such really smart stories to writing something like this. It really makes me think that someone somewhere was telling him that he needed to write dumber so that they could target the audience that they wanted. But sorry, that was a rant. Rant is now over, I'm back to reviewing. So those were some of the things that I did not like. What did I like? One, a minor thing, but I think it's pretty cool that we're getting some pretty obscure villains in these first couple of episodes. At least obscure by the standards of non-comic book fans. And heck, I'm sure there's comic book fans who aren't really familiar with the Frightful Four. If you go and look at past Spider-Man cartoons, they were much more likely to use villains who are full-on Spider-Man villains. I like that, at least in these episodes, we're going to see more Marvel Universe villains that you wouldn't be likely to see elsewhere. And yeah, we're also getting Norman Osborn, which is a given in a Spider-Man show, and we're getting Dr. Octopus in the shadows. But they weren't really in the foreground here. So I think it's cool that the episodes that I watched were willing to take a little bit of a risk and use characters like Claw and Thundra as villains in the opening episodes. I also really liked the premise of this episode. At least half of the Spider-Man cartoons that preceded this one were pretty beholden to the continuity of the comics. The 90s animated series and Spectacular Spider-Man both were animated versions of what you could expect to see in the comics. And while there is nothing wrong with that, I think it is okay for cartoons like this to branch out and do stuff that the comics haven't done before. Sometimes it might not work out so well. For example, the X-Men Evolution cartoon, where I wasn't a huge fan of the idea of mutants going to school in a normal high school. But back to Spider-Man. I actually like the idea of Spider-Man training with S.H.I.E.L.D. to be a better superhero. For one, it's something we haven't really seen before. Yeah, in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, Fury told Peter that when he was an adult, he would be forced to work for S.H.I.E.L.D. no matter what. I never did like that idea, and at first I thought this cartoon was going to improve on that scene with Fury giving Peter a choice to come to S.H.I.E.L.D. or not. Then in the second episode, Fury gets a line of dialogue that makes things sound like they are not really up to Peter no matter what he wants. No me gusta. I've never really been a fan of Nick Fury as the overlord of the Marvel Universe, where he knows all secrets and he's almost as shady as the bad guys that he's fighting, and this is treading on that, so that's not to my liking, but whatever. I felt like, with the first episode anyway, this show was set up nicely and things could potentially be really interesting, even with the things that I did not like in the first episode. And then we got to the second episode. It's almost like this is an entirely different series, really. I'm not even joking a little bit when I say that literally, in the first half of the second episode, nothing happens. We see Peter fighting some robots on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. Then Fury and Dr. Connors show him this flying motorcycle thing that is allegedly faster than Spider-Man swinging on webs across the city. Then Fury suggests that Peter try to ride the motorcycle without telling him how to turn it off or anything like that. And I call bullcrap on this scene for another reason. As is typical for Nick Fury, he knows everything about Peter, including his secret identity. Then, in this scene, he somehow does not know that Peter doesn't even have his learner's permit? Yeah, that dog's not going hunting. Then, after the tremendous waste of time with Peter on the motorcycle, Peter finds out that he will be training with other teenage superheroes, and he is somehow offended by this notion, and then he tries to quit. Then, I poo you not, halfway into the episode, stuff actually starts happening, in that he is attacked from out of nowhere by the Frightful Three. The last half of this episode is okay, I guess. Peter learns teamwork. We get to see that even when he sometimes is a little messy in his approach to taking down the bad guys, Peter is a natural at this, and is also a natural at telling these other kids what to do in this situation. All this time I thought Fury was just pulling these comparisons between Peter and Captain America out of his butt. But no, at least this version of Spider-Man, when he's 30 or so, I could easily see him leading the Avengers or doing something equally amazing. But that small ray of sunshine does not stop the rest of this episode from sucking eggs. It's not even one single unifying thing that I can point to and say, that is why this episode is awful. It's a whole bunch of little things that all add up to me washing my hands of this series. But the biggest thing is literally half of the episode being wasted on slapstick humor that I guess I'm supposed to find funny. It's really not funny at all, though. Following that, this show thought that it needed to specifically reach into my brain and pull out one of my biggest pet peeves, and it decided to put Agent Phil Coulson into this show. Oh boy, I'm sure everyone listening to this video is going to find this puzzling or will disagree with my stance, but guys, I hate Agent Coulson like nothing else on this planet. I never understood why people latched onto him in the first two Iron Man movies or the Thor movie, since he never got more than a line or two of dialogue in each film, and was always just sort of there. He had no personality, he was just a face for the faceless corporation that is S.H.I.E.L.D., for the occasions when we couldn't have the face of Nick Fury representing the faceless corporation that is S.H.I.E.L.D. Even though I did not like the Avengers movie as much as everyone else did, I will say that Coulson had a couple of good moments there, and then Marvel Studios screwed that up by bringing him back to life, effectively killing all of the tension from the Avengers movie. And then they went and built an entire TV show around this guy that I still don't care about. And apparently Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is an okay show now after like half a season, and apparently Coulson actually has a character now and personality and stuff like that. But you know what? Screw that. I should not have to wait 5 years for a glorified cameo to suddenly get a personality and therefore a reason for me to care. And you know what else I shouldn't have to do? I shouldn't have to put up with this guy popping up outside of the Avengers movies. He's in the comics now, which is a bullet that is inconvenient, but I can still dodge that one since I don't read Avengers-related material, and so I can pretty easily avoid him. But now he's showing up in a Spider-Man cartoon, and you know what? He still is bland and has no personality. Who do I have to bribe so that this guy can just stop existing, period? It'd be one thing if this guy was just a boring, forgettable S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who shows up to tell Fury that Spider-Man can't be trusted. But no, this show goes even further and puts Coulson in as the principal of Spidey's school. Oh, you guys are going out of your way to make me want to not watch this show, right? Well, it worked. Congratulations. Oh, and there's more. I mean, the Coulson thing should be enough, right? Taking a boring non-character that nobody really likes and are all just pretending to like, that should be enough. But on top of that, and half of the episode just killing time because this episode really didn't have much meat to it, there's the 4 sidekick characters. I guess they're really the same age as Peter, but Fury talks these kids up as being extremely inexperienced, and Spidey treats them that way too, so I'm going with sidekicks here. Now, I am not an avid fan of any of these characters from the comics. I've read the 1970s Nova series, and I wasn't incredibly impressed. But this isn't even that Nova, so I'm pretty much 100% unfamiliar with any of these guys. But I gotta say, none of these characters really clicked for me. It could be that the episode just doesn't spend that much time with them, and if I had waited 2 or 4 episodes, that I would have come to like them. But hey, here's a fun idea. Instead of filling half of the episode with Peter pointlessly fighting robots and flying a motorcycle around the city, maybe this episode could have had Peter meet these guys earlier, and then we could have had most of the episode to get to know them instead of just kind of throwing them in there and giving them annoying dialogue. In a way, this reminds me of one of the biggest things that I hated about the Young Justice series. This episode just kind of expects you to know who these people are and thinks that just because they are putting them in this episode, even if only for a short while, that you should care about them. That may be how things work in the comics, but in a cartoon, I really feel like you should actually introduce a character as if the audience has never seen him or her before, which was what went down in the Young Justice series. You'd get T.O. Morrow show up for an episode, and nobody would ever say, "Hey, that's T.O. Morrow, he's a bad guy." It's basically the same here. And yeah, Spider-Man does introduce them all to the audience in one of his little asides, but just saying someone's name and their superpowers is not enough, because I still don't know these guys from each other. I guess Nova is the arrogant one, Cage is maybe the laid-back cool guy, White Tiger is the chick and doesn't really have much personality beyond that, Iron Fist is sort of the quiet, unassuming, super powerful dude. I'm sure these guys get more exposure and you learn more about them as people as the series progresses, but that's inexcusable when this episode would have been perfectly fine as an introduction to who they are if you just remove the filler that serves no purpose in this episode. And I'm also calling Rhino crap on this scene for another reason. In the first episode, Fury makes his sales pitch to Peter by saying that he's irresponsible and that he needs to learn responsibility by joining S.H.I.E.L.D. Then, in this episode, suddenly Peter is a potential mentor figure to these kids with no field experience? What exactly changed in the literally 1 day since he was an untrained rookie? Maybe this is just part of Fury as a master manipulator who will blatantly lie to get what he wants, which is Peter to be under his thumb at S.H.I.E.L.D. If that's it, it still doesn't work for me since I don't like Fury as being the master manipulator guy. Like I said, it wasn't really one specific thing that made me decide that this show was not worth my time. If it had been any one of these things, then I would probably be watching the whole season and reviewing it then. But altogether, it was enough to make me really not like this show. But I should clarify, I did not hate everything here. Like I said, there was some good stuff in these 2 episodes. There was at least 2 moments that I actually laughed out loud at, and I felt if that kind of humor was the default of this show instead of the dumb slapsticky Scooby-Doo-esque humor, then it'd be just a little smarter of a show. Really, even if you take into account all of the stuff I hated here, whether I mentioned it or didn't have time to, this was still better than Spider-Man Unlimited. But still, just because you pretty easily escape the fate of being the worst superhero animated series of all time does not mean that you're good or worth watching. And sadly, I don't think this show is worth watching. Maybe let your kids watch it, but even then, there are significantly better shows out there that your kid could watch if you want to introduce them to superheroes. And it's because I won't be watching any more of this series that I decided to just do a video on what I had seen instead of devoting a couple of Saturdays to the episodes that I had seen, since usually the superhero cartoons that I review on Saturdays are the ones that I'm in for the long haul. What did you guys think? Are you guys fans of this show? What do you like about it? Do you hate it more than I did? What did you hate about it? Did you like my review? If so, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll be back tomorrow for a different kind of video. So until then, I will see you guys later. Have a good one.